Hello, my name is Mariana. I am an educator at PEEC, and today I'm going to talk to you a bit about this bear skull. So this is a replica skull of an American black bear. That's the species of bear that is native to northern New Mexico. There's a lot about a bear's ecology that you can actually read on the skull. So let's start with the mouth, which is the most dramatic part of this skull. So as you can see here, this bear has these very prominent canine teeth up front. This is indicative of a predator, and black bears are predators. They like to hunt small mammals. They'll eat rabbits, deer fawns, and elk calves when in season. Really any type of meat they can get a hold of opportunistically. And these sharp, prominent canines help the bear to grab onto and kill its prey and to bite into the meat. But bears are omnivores, which means they eat both meat and plants. And if you look farther into his mouth, you can see here that the molars are actually wide and flat, a little bit like your own molars inside your mouth. And this shaped tooth is actually excellent for crushing and grinding plant material. So soft and hard plant material, leaves and shrubs, berries and acorns and other seeds. And that's why the teeth are so flat and wide, excellent for processing plant material. So this is really a classic omnivorous mouth with both the meat-eating teeth and the plant-eating teeth. Now, in order to find its food sources, whether plant or animal, the bear has to have an excellent sense of smell. And bears are famous for having among the keenest smells in the animal kingdom. And you can see here that it's also demonstrated on the skull that this animal has a large nose, especially if you look from the front. You can see this really large nasal cavity. So the black bear has inside its nose a really intricate web of sheets of bone. So these sheets or plates of bone are all covered in membrane, and the more sheets of bone an animal has and the larger the nasal cavity, the more surface area that animal has in order to pick up smells. So you can see this really complex webbing, this real complex maze of webbing, and the large nasal cavity, which was really indicative of an excellent sense of smell for this animal. And bears use this excellent sense of smell not only to find food sources, but also to find each other. They're not very social animals. They do not live in groups except for small family units, a mother and her cubs. And they use their sense of smell also to find each other, especially during the mating season. One thing that bears are not famous for is their sense of hearing. So bears do not have very excellent hearing. It might be kind of comparable to human beings' hearing. And this is also demonstrated on the skull. So I'm going to show you a bone here at the base of the skull, which I've marked in red. And this is the auditory bulla, or auditory pocket, I like to call it. It is a cavity, and from the side you can see that there's an opening. It's hollow in there. And this bone contains the inner ear of the animal. The larger and more bulbous and round this bone is, the better this animal can hear. But on this bear, you can see it's kind of flat, not very distinct. It's hard to point out unless it's marked there in red. I have a prairie dog skull to show you a comparison of what I'm talking about here. So on this prairie dog skull, you can see a little more clearly at the base of the skull these two sort of balloons. Those are the auditory bulla, and these two pockets are really prominent. They're very round and bulbous. And you can see just from the skull alone that this animal has an excellent sense of hearing, especially the size of these bullae in comparison to the size of the skull. They're quite large and very prominent, very obvious to see. Whereas with the bear, it's kind of tricky. You can't really see immediately where the auditory pockets are. They're very flat and the cavity is very small. So that's a comparison that you can see between an animal that has excellent hearing, the prairie dog, and an animal that has pretty average hearing or mediocre hearing, the black bear. So this is why when you're out there on the trail, you should make noise. Make sure that you're not being too quiet in bear country, because it is actually quite easy to startle or surprise a bear, because if they're distracted and you're being really quiet, they won't immediately hear you coming. And that's demonstrated on the skull, like all the amazing things about this black bear. So really everything about a bear's ecology can be found on its body, and especially on the skull. And those were a few of my favorites.